Yes, yes. Can
you all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Sarah Isha, for introducing me and giving me this opportunity. I'm honored to be here to be able to speak to the Empaia Global Committee and audience. I think they're doing a great job in bringing awareness to our Indian community and continuing to break the silence and the stigma around this topic and many others. They're doing a great job in educating our community. Today, we're going to talk about how to empower all people in domestic violence situations and relationships. But today, I'm going to gear my topic towards women. There is a lot of both men and women experience domestic violence, but there is a greater impact with women. So we're going to talk about the women audience and how to empower them. So regardless of the circumstance of your past, your relationship or your past, no one deserves to be abused, and you're never responsible for your partner's abusive actions. So what is women empowerment? There's been a lot of topic about this in recent years. I think last month was Women Empowerment Month. You hear it in our families, in our homes, at work, in businesses and communities and politics. What is it? It's empowering women to accept their viewpoints and making efforts to seek their views. Raising the status of women through education, awareness, literacy, and training. The empowerment equips the women to make life-determining decisions through different areas of their life and in society. It gives them an opportunity in gender roles, which allow them freedoms and to pursue goals. So things like getting a degree in business or computer science, those are mainly male-dominated degrees, but now we see a lot more women doing that versus just teaching or nursing. They're also in the jobs. Women can be in a lawyer or a policeman, or policewoman. So that's about redefining the gender roles. It also it enhances women empowerment. Empowering women enhances their quality and quantity as humans and in the human race. When it comes to domestic violence, empowering women is really, really important. It determines if they're in a healthy or unhealthy relationship. It determines life and death at some points. So what are five types of empowerment? There are social empowerment, educational, economic, political, and psychological. When you think about social, it's recognizing that they have a place at the table. If it's with race, ethnicity, gender, it is to be able to say women also deserve to be at this table and not walked on. It is normal for women to be there. It's in, when you think about these 5 places of empowerment, in education, economic, political, and psychological, what it's really about is creating confidence and self-esteem. It's bringing light to hope. It increases them, their views, and their positions in social, political, intellectual, cultural, and religious places. It broadens and brings insights of a woman's perspective. It helps with lessening narrow-mindedness. And the most important parts of this, it enhances healthy thoughts and feelings. It teaches tolerance of women and women's roles. And it stresses the importance of women getting educated, them being built up in self-worth and self-esteem, and about their own health, mental and physical health. So if you're an empowered woman, what does that look like? What are the characteristics? You have a sense of self-worth. You have rights to choices. There's rights to opportunities and resources. There's right to power and control. And this is an important part, which we'll touch on later, in their own lives, both within the home and outside the home. They can influence the direction of social change and more social and economic order, justice, nationally and internationally. They're a part of that policy making. So now we're going to shift from just talking about individual women, but women in relationships, whether it's who they're dating or if they're in committed relationships or marriages. To empower women is to know what is healthy, unhealthy, and even abusive relationships. So in a healthy relationship, you should be able to talk openly about your problems, listen to one another, respect one another's opinions, feelings, needs. You have the freedom to choose. There's trust. There's no, like, I have to prove my trust or trustworthiness. There is honesty and a level of privacy in healthy relationships. There's an equality in making decisions. We hold each other to the same standards. There's boundary settings. I can spend time away from my family and my home or my partner without too much question. You're practicing consent in intimate relationship. I can talk about physically what's appropriate intimately and what I'm not comfortable with. Parenting is a partnership, and both can be a part of parenting the children, their roles, responsibilities, and how you want to share values and morals with them. So unhealthy is, I would say, again, all couples can get and be unhealthy without it becoming abusive. So relationships can look unhealthy when there isn't a openness to communication. When there's disrespect in that communication or an intolerance to your partner. When there is a non-trusting attitude, refusing to believe them, feel entitled to invade their privacy, being dishonest, lying to your partner, omitting, not sharing all the facts, taking control, making decisions for themselves, or one-sided in the relationship. Isolating your partner from contacting other people, getting online, doing things. You ignore boundaries. When they say, I don't want you to do that, you still do that. There's an inequality with economics. I might make money, but I have no choice in how I might spend it all the time. You do. You get that choice. You might make decisions unilaterally, decide where we're going to build a house or buy a house. Abusive communication is very harmful. This is where a lot of domestic violence shows up. It's an abusive relationship. This is when the communication is hurtful, threatening, insulting, demeaning. It is when you mistreat the other. You don't respect their thoughts, their feelings. They're not a part of any decision making. Their physical safety is at harm. They make untrue accusatory. You're accusing people of cheating, being unfaithful. You might even escalate by saying, you got to prove that you didn't talk to so-and-so, or you're not doing this. You have to prove your innocence. They have control over your social media. They have control of what you put there or what you say. They might have access to it and put things on there. They make decisions about your finances. You could be going to work, but you have no access to bank accounts or what you make and how you get to spend it. They force intimacy. You have no choice in how many children, if you're going to use birth control. The partner is in charge. And you have really essentially no rights or freedoms in the relationship. With your children, they might manipulate the children by saying to them lies, untrue statements, negative statements about you. And again, the biggest thing when it comes to abusive relationships is that they have power and control. So here are some common warning signs in abusive relationships. Unhealthy and abusive relationships, again, aren't good, but abusive relationships is really bad. The difference is in unhealthy relationships, there's a chance, a hope that there's an opportunity for growth or change. There's a possibility of health or wellness. In abusive relationship, all the power and control is very one-sided. And so here are some examples of that. Telling you that you never do anything right, destroying your belongings, controlling your finances, intimidating, and making threats. So boundaries is an important part of this conversation. Both boundaries can be physical, emotional, and now there's, because of social media, a digital boundary that you have to be mindful of. And it can range from like loose and to rigid boundaries to healthy to unhealthy boundaries. So its emotional boundary includes, can I rely on my partner? Are they safe? Can I share my feelings and thoughts and it not be used against me? When it comes to physical boundaries, again, it's physically, my body is safe. There's no injuries to my body, parts of my body. I am physically feeling safe in my home with my partner. I think we tell children, you know, there's this personal bubble, right? Like you can't touch anybody or hurt anybody. It's the same thing with adults. When it comes to physical boundaries, one of the other components is intimacy. You know, intimacy isn't a currency. We don't owe our partner anything, and it's unfair for them to claim that we do. So it's important to establish physical boundaries of what's healthy, emotionally as well as physically. And in this day and age, we have to think about also digital boundaries. Do we share passcodes? What do we post about our relationships? What's not okay to post? Do we use that Find My Friend app because of safety, or is that because of control? So having respect in relationship and healthy relationships, it's both people share those responsibility. In unhealthy, it's tricky because people can say, well, I'm, you know, using that Find My Friend because I want to know that you're safe, but they could really be using it to control you. So you have to, every relationship and individual has to be mindful of what is a healthy boundary, and is this being used unhealthily towards me or in our relationship. So a lot of times people ask, why do women stay? Why aren't they empowered to report or take action? And these are some of the reasons why. There's a lot of data that's out there that say that there's unreported cases because of shame, social taboos, fear of further abuse. If you think about it, in our Indian community, how many conversations prior to the last couple of years have we had about domestic violence or mental health or any kinds of community issue? Not much, or it happens in the moment and kind of passes. In our culture, in Indian cultures or cultures from non-Americans, there's a lot of, because people don't speak the language, they're not able to learn the language. Their partner keeps all the paperwork, either the legal documents, passwords, they're in charge of the car insurance, health insurance. We're not allowed to get our driver's license. In abusive relationships, the partner does things like these. They threaten deportation. They threaten that they'll withdraw citizenship paperwork or legal status. They use a lot of threats against our family, saying we're not going to bring them here. I'm not going to file that paperwork for them. They delay lots of things like that. They tell the survivor or victim, if you report this, your status is in trouble, right? So people are fearful of reporting anything to the police. They feel they have all the financial and social connections. And the biggest one, I think, for especially women, is their children are used against them. Somehow they're threatened by saying, I'm going to take the kids away from you, or I'm going to send them away. I'm going to send them to India and you're never going to be able to see them, or I'm going to take them to India. So a lot of times they take that threat, and that's very scary for women. And these are some other things: fear, normalizing abuse. Oh, it always happens, you know, like, oh, you and husband fight, like that's not a big deal. So they lower those types of things. low self-esteem, lack of resources, a lot of that immigration, and the biggest thing is children. But knowing no matter what the circumstances are, survivors deserve to be supported in whatever their decision is and empowered to reclaim control of their lives on their terms. So how can we support women? The biggest things are doing things like this, talking about abusive relationships, healthy relationships, how do we empower them, acknowledge that they're in difficult situations, know the warning signs to help somebody that might be in a domestic violence relationship. Let them know that you're an ally. Let them know that you want to help break the silence or the stigma, that they can reach out to you. Remember, it is not your job to rescue them. It is their job to rescue themselves, but we can be allies and support systems and soft landings for them. It's really important to be non-judgmental, encouraging them to have support systems outside their home, to go to work, to have their kids in activities, have them involved in church and society, reaching out to other people. Checking in on them is really, really important. If you know somebody, to be able to have the resources, the numbers, the therapists, the lawyers, that they can start thinking about these things. The experience of surviving a relationship that is traumatic takes a lot of forms, and it really depends on support is a huge part of that. Emotional support, the things that we talked about in the previous slide of acknowledging that their situation is scary and hard and terrible and that they're brave is huge. It's also very important to not talk poorly about their abuser. If they decide to change their mind and be with that person tomorrow, but 4 weeks from now they want to leave again, they might not feel like they can comfortably come back to you. So be able to talk about them and talk about their situation versus talking about the abuser. Always helping them think about safety, their safety, and if they decide to leave, that safety of their family and children. And also safety if they decide to stay in the relationship. It's also important to be able emotionally to say to them, I'm happy to go with you. I can, I don't know, I can drive you there. I can take you there. I can set up an appointment. So those are other ways to emotionally support them. If people are trying to leave a domestic violence relationship, an abusive relationship, there's things that they need to think about. Where are they going to live? Where are they going to be that they don't get harmed? Is your home a safe place that the abuser won't come to? What about healthcare? How are they going to feed themselves? Where's the money going to come from? Do they have all their documents or copies of documents? Do they have research or are keeping information about all the experiences they have? Do they have picture, what we call evidence? It's also, if they give you permission to talk to schools or work, or helping them talk to their workplaces and schools, because there could be a crisis at those locations. A dad can go take a kid from the school and the mom has no idea. They can show up at your work and cause problems. So it's being able to inform those managers, of course, with your privacy in mind, but it keeps everybody safe. It's also good to, we talked about work and school, but at church, to be able to talk about, can I talk to the Etchen, or is there someone at our church group or in our society that we can also talk to? So these are some things that we can say to women. I believe you, you're not alone. Your safety and your children's safety is really important. Some things that you can do. Again, it is huge. Judgment in our Indian community is very prominent. And how do we learn to be a community without judgments? Non-judgment is one of the reasons one of the places we need to grow. This will allow women to continue to break their silence and to get help and resources. Check on their physical health. If they're hurt, get them to a doctor, get them to a hospital. Offer to, watch their kids if they're feeling uneasy about something happening at home. Don't make them feel guilty if they decide to stay or if they decide to leave. Their decision is their decision. How do we support them? So I want to shift a little bit. As a mental health provider in this field for over 20 years, a lot of times we don't talk about men's mental health or about boys. It's, again, another stigma that we have. So I think it's important, especially in this topic, and to empower women in healthy relationships. Families need to educate your boys. We need to talk about how to raise them appropriately and raise them to treat women appropriately. So we need to teach them at an early age. I would say as a toddler, we need to be able to help them express anger, frustrations, demonstrate what's okay and what's not. We teach them you don't put your hands on somebody at a very early age. In this country, that's no, you respect women, right? I think it's the same thing. As we're raising our little boys, how do we educate them in these areas? How do we be there? How do we physically be in our homes that we are sharing? As a dad, how do I role model to them how I treat my wife? How do I treat people in community? How to respect women. I think this is a great topic to bring up to your children. After this, many of you might say, let's go have a conversation over the dinner table, or I'm going to sit my kids down. But it's not one conversation, it's multiple. So if there's opportunity, something that's happening, you're in the car listening to music and they're talking about violence against women or using bad language against women, that is an opportunity to talk and further help educate them in healthy ways. It's also an opportunity to say, hey, what do you think about that? Right? As a parent, it's always, we might watch a show or something, some crisis is happening in our world, because there's a lot of crises happening. How do we open up the dialogue to ask our kids, what do you think about that? Do they think that's okay? Do they think that's not okay? It also gives us another opportunity to talk and teach. The biggest part for boys, I think, is not only dads talking to your boys, but moms. I remember doing a parenting class with a mom, and I remember her saying, it was really important for me to talk to my son about intimacy, because you usually say dads talk to your boys about how to treat girls, moms talk to your daughters. We always say cross that path, because daughters should know from their fathers how you should be treated. Fathers, you would not want your daughters in abusive relationships or men that treat them poorly. Likewise, moms should talk to their boys about how to treat women. So I think these are conversations in our families that we can do. So again, we all deserve independence and individualizations, even if we're in a relationship. If our partner does not know how to deal with our independence and escalate by having abusive behaviors, it's a clear sign someone is gaining power and control, which is abuse and not okay. Abusive relationships, unhealthy relationships are scary and tough. Healthy relationships nurture independence. It doesn't feel threatened by a partner seeking friends or safety or happiness or anything that brings joy, even away from the relationship. I want everyone to hear this very loud and clear. Abuse is a choice. Nobody is forcing your partner to take away your independence. Therefore, the fault of abusing and escalating the abuse lies on only one person, the abuser. As a therapist, I always say, yes, we have problems. Yes, we should be able to solve them, but it's not very black and white. There's this gray that we have. We want to provide grace. Like, we don't want to say, hey, this happened once and it could be your choice. After once, I'm done, right? But there are lots of times that we want to provide our partners with grace. So extending grace to another person is kind and compassionate, and it's normal to want to give that someone the love, benefit of the doubt. But however, giving that person repeated grace and and it slowly it creeps into abusive relationship is not healthy. So what we want here to remember is you giving grace is important because you love that person, but you giving them grace repeatedly might be you making justifications, being in denial, rationalizing, or making excuses. So we have to admit and acknowledge that that's happening. And is there help? Are we willing to go get help? Is our partners willing to go get help? So this line of grace and abuse can cause some problems. So knowing where that place is important. There's this approach of wait and see about abuse. And here are a few questions to ask yourself if you're considering grace, abuse, leaving, staying. What behaviors are you willing to put up with? How far are you willing to go? What is an acceptable? What is unacceptable, and your line, your boundary line. The longer a survivor stays in a power and control situation with an abuser, what you're doing is giving them all the power and control, and it could be a dangerous situation. And sometimes it's harder to leave. So I think it's important to think about these questions, but you deserve to be happy and in a healthy relationship, safe too. So changes on the horizon, even having talks like this monthly in lots of groups and lots of community has been happening. So empowering women is already working. There's data that shows that people are reporting domestic violence annually more than any other year before. 2 reasons. I think people are getting the community awareness and support they need. And because of that education, people are not standing up for it, and people are deciding to not do it. There's more of a shift from blaming and shaming the victims to encouraging being in treatment, therapy, having healthy boundaries, and educating. The most important part of the empowerment approach, the goal there is to provide education. If that's community awarenesses, advocacy, crisis and pre-crisis services and opportunities. And there's a lot more services, because when you jump into a swimming pool off of a diving board, that one person isn't the only one that gets splashed on or affected. Everybody in that swimming pool, so everybody in your home, your parents, you, your abuser, your children are all affected. And there's a lot more support for the entire family system. So I'm going to end here. And when I think about empowering women, this is what I think of. When women are living in a safe, fulfilled, productive lives, they can reach their full potential. They're contributing their skills and their workforces and their communities and their families. They're raising happier, healthier children. By empowering women who are in abusive relationship, we're contributing to a healthier society and humanity at large. Thank you all. These are some resources that people can turn to. Empaia Global has a website. There's some information about women's law. And that last resource is the national hotline, at least in the US, for domestic violence topics, issues, concerns, things to think about. These books are books about women empowerment, if it's from work life to how people who have been in struggling situations have gotten out of it. And Rise is by a Malayalee, young Malayalee girl that talks about empowerment. So I want to give her a plug. And then there's a telephone number here for a hotline if you're in a crisis situation. And there's contact information about me. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Angela. That was very informative and very productive. Again, thank you very much for taking the time and explaining all this to us.